Howdy, this is Jason Marino. Welcome to the Postscript of Life, Part 2, Ideal. Today we're going to talk about how each of us has a different perspective on what it is that we are living toward in our lives, why it is that that uniqueness is important, and how it is that it ends up connecting us with our life in a way that's authentic to who we are, but also different from others that are around us. If I were to ask you, what is important to you? There might be a category of things that are really obvious to start with. We might be thinking of my family and my friends. My church might be important to me. The work that I do is something that's important. It provides for me and I'm able to be productive within it. Maybe I'm going to school, and the fact that I'm going to school is something that's important in order to better myself. Or even things like, I know that I should exercise. This is very, very important. That doesn't mean we do it all the time, but we know that it's important. These are things that we might say are obviously important. But what about things that are not obviously important, but are still important? What if there were things like creativity? We love doing things that make us feel good about our ability to make something. Like if we go painting, or if we go and set up like make music or sing together, or if there's some way in which we've made a new playlist, or if we've actually thought about, well, what's something else creative that I can make or do that's unique to me? Maybe we built a chair, or created something else. But even things like, I know that travel's important. It's not as important as food, but it's important to me in my life, and I believe it's something I should prioritize. Maybe even being accepted by the people that we love. Not being accepted by every person we know, but being accepted by people that we care about. It can be very important. And then maybe something like, well, I listen to music or I love audiobooks. That's important to me. It's not important the way that my family's important, but it's still important to me. Or even other projects that we work on. And what I'm trying to get at is that with this, there are different things that are important to us that matter, that we may not be thinking of in the same way as our core principles or our core needs. And that takes us down to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We realize that we have to start off with our physical bodies and making sure that we take care of them. And then we have to have a sense of safety. The fact that we have to believe that we are safe in our world and that we're not about to be harmed at any time. Feeling loved and belonging. These are things that are important. But then once those are dealt with, then we can look at things like the esteem of the people around me and the esteem that I have for myself as being important. And then finally, self-actualization. Whenever we learn and grow and see things that we wouldn't have seen otherwise, ideas or perspectives that we wouldn't have thought about. Self-actualization, whenever we grow in this deeper way. All of these are important. But as we live them out, they're going to be unique to each of us in the way that we embody them, in the way that we pursue them, and in the way that we realize them. Now, with that, we oftentimes want to think about, what is this ideal that I am moving toward? Now, you may be saying to yourself, well, I don't need to move toward an ideal. I'm just myself. I don't have to think about it. But in reality, as we can tell from generation to generation, from people group to people group, different people have different ideas of what it is to be the ideal, what it is that they're pursuing as their ideal self, their ideal person. And that can be shaped by all sorts of things. We might have been shaped as kids by people that we saw in our lives, maybe family members, maybe friends, or maybe we saw people that were on TV, those that we wanted to imitate. For me, it was always MacGyver and Tom Selleck, because, MacGyver was able to take care of anything at any time with whatever was around him, and Tom Selleck was just confident, and I really liked that. Or it might have just been an idea that was in our head of something of saying, this is who I want to be. I'm going to be this person. Whatever it might be, is that somehow over our lives, we created an ideal of what we are trying to be and what we're trying to be like. Now, you might be saying to yourself, wait a minute, aren't we all just trying to be like Jesus? Okay, maybe so. But not all of us are early 30s carpenters living in Judea with possibly a mullet and, darker skin. I mean, whatever it might be, is that we are not the same person as Jesus. We just want to be like him in the sense of following after God's own heart and trying to be caring and sacrificial, the principles that we care about there. But it doesn't mean we're going to have the same likes and preferences. It doesn't mean we're going to be the same in our personalities. We don't even know what Jesus' personality was like. I mean, there were times where Jesus was kind and sweet, and then there were times where he was kind of a jerk. I mean, he's flipping over tables and pushing people around and saying, "Get out of here, you brood of vipers." There are a lot of us that are not nearly as abrasive as Jesus was. So the thing is that our personalities are going to be shaped in ways that are different from what it is that we might think of with Jesus. But it doesn't mean that we're not being like Jesus. It just means that we are unique in our personalities, and we have to understand that and respect it. For example, 1 Timothy 2, Paul keeps telling Timothy that he needs to follow the examples of his mother and his grandmother. This doesn't mean don't be like Jesus. It doesn't mean don't be like Paul. It just means you have two people that you have seen. Be like them in the example they've taught you. With that, we have to understand ourselves if we want to see how we can shape our lives to be more like Christ. With that, I'd like to talk about 4 major areas in which we can understand ourselves. The first one is Myers-Briggs personality test. Now, with this, after a series of questions, they can be done either for free online with a less precise series of reflections and perspectives afterwards, or it can be paid for and you can be able to get more coaching and a more specialized reflection from it. But a Myers-Briggs is basically a chance to answer questions that help you to understand yourself. So for example, maybe you're trying to figure out why it is that you can't seem to do things that are artistic and like painting or more drawing and such. But in reality, you're more of a logician. You're somebody that just wants to learn, but not necessarily always trying to create an artistic expression. It doesn't mean you're not artistic. It doesn't mean that you're not creative. It just means you don't work in that way. Or you may be thinking, why can't I be one of the imaginative thinkers of the world? I really wanted to be like Steve Jobs, and I really wanted to be, so visionary in many ways. Well, but then in reality, you're more spontaneous and enthusiastic. And so you're not one of the strategic, imaginative thinkers because you're more of an entertainer. It doesn't mean that any one of these is wrong. But what it means is that if we keep trying to pursue things that are like somebody else, we're going to constantly be frustrated. And then we're never going to end up enjoying the life that God has given us, and we're never going to excel at it because we're trying to be someone that we're not. So for example, you might have known a pastor that was very charismatic and inspiring, and then maybe you tried to serve in the church in some way, but then you realized that all you wanted to do was just debate everybody. Doesn't mean you're wrong. It doesn't mean that you're not doing a great job in the area that God has given you. But by understanding that, then everything that we can do can end up fitting better into our strengths instead of us trying to pretend that we're somebody that we're not. A second one is the Enneagram. Now, the Enneagram is a pretty old series of questions and understandings of how we work. It's similar, but it emphasizes different parts of who we are. So with this is that it's got more connections in being able to show a person this is your main tendency. When you get tired emotionally or physically, this is the area that you usually become weak at. Maybe this is an area that you struggle in more when you're weak. And then other times you find out that you have certain qualities that fit otherwise. So for example, you might be somebody who is very much of a peacemaker, and you always want to try to make everything okay. But it might turn out that there's also a part of you that does enjoy challenging others, that you want there to be peace, but you also like to push them a bit. Or maybe it turns out that whenever you're tired and you realize that you just don't have enough in you, you just want to give in all the time. whatever it might be, is that the more that we can understand each of these parts of ourselves, then not only do we know more of our gifts of what we're more likely to be able to do, but also we know what we're more likely to be like when we're tired. So we know what to be careful of. We know that I've had a long week, so I better be careful for this because this might set me off. Now, there are different perspectives on this, but it's just a way to help us think through things that we can already see in ourselves. We just need something to help bring it to light and help make it clearer to us. Now, there's also Strengths Finder. Now, Strengths Finder is able to look not just at your personality, but also individual traits. So these are things that you're quite good at. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't do anything that doesn't fit in these strengths. So, for example, maybe you're patient. Maybe you're compassionate. Maybe you're thoughtful. Maybe you have all these different gifts, but then it turns out that there are some that maybe you're okay at, but aren't your strongest traits. So maybe you're not quite as discerning. Maybe you're not able to stop yourself from being impulsive. Maybe there are just some areas where you just struggle some. And what that means is not that you can't grow. It doesn't mean that you can't, learn how to adapt in different ways, but it's a question of saying, are you setting yourself up for failure by taking on tasks that might be outside of your strengths? So in other words, doing a job because you need to and it's in front of you, that may very well be important and may very well need to happen. But if you're constantly pursuing things that you're not as strong in, then not only will you probably be more likely to be frustrated, but also there might be somebody that is stronger in that area that could be doing a better job at it. And this fits not just in the church, but in our home lives, at our workplace, at schools, lots of places where we're constantly trying to push ourselves with things that we're not just as strong in. And even things like careers. We take on jobs because we need to. It's important. We have to make money, we have to provide for ourselves and for our families. But if there's a way that our career can overlap with our personalities and our strengths, then we're more likely to find satisfaction in it. We're more likely to find a personal sense of well-being in it. And it doesn't mean that it has to be a certain type of job, but rather there are aspects of that job that might fit us and what we're like. So we could be creative as an accountant, hopefully not that creative, but we might be creative in the way that we present the business of what's going on and how we need to be more mindful of our expenditures. Or maybe it turns out that we're creative though as a forestry major, or we're going to be a ranger. And then we realize that we're able to find more creative ways to take care of the environment around us that others hadn't thought of. The thing is that then maybe other times we're just more logical. We're logical about the way that we present things to people, or we're logical about the way that we take care of tasks. But with that is when we look at all of our parts of our personalities and how all the different traits come together, as well as our strengths and our abilities, so our passions, our strengths, our characteristics, and our natural abilities, all these things together, then we end up seeing that certain careers might end up bringing us more joy than others. And it's just something to think about as we move forward. And I also then want to see why this is that this connects to our idea of worship. Because each one of us has a different way of living our lives. Each one of us has a different way of taking care of our body, mind, soul, and spirit, our finding quiet places that are safe, finding ways of having fun and being creative, connecting with our family and our friends, different fortunes, different time, resources, money, energy, different perspectives, different purpose. Maybe one person says, I'm supposed to be the best teacher, or one person says, I'm supposed to be the best parent, or one person says, I'm supposed to be the best park ranger, or I'm supposed to be the best whatever it might be. And then other times just being able to celebrate the life that we have. And with that, it ends up changing what we do in church. Because if we're constantly trying to fit one mold with everything, then the people at our church are going to be frustrated and we're only going to reach a narrow percentage. So maybe when we're looking at each of these areas over the next 7 sessions, then we need to ask ourselves questions of how is it that what we do as the church can end up meeting people in their unique lives with their unique strengths and their unique passions so they can live uniquely the way God has designed them, saved them, and empowered them to be.